going on? Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the RPG Daily. I'm Richard Quiner. We're here with the Game Master's Craft. This is episode 8. We did a whole week last week, and then I took one day break, and now I'm back doing more. I went so crazy, I chopped my hair off, and I did like a 60% okay. Maybe 50% okay, but it's the pandemic, so it's fine. Today we have a very special guest. It's a good friend of mine, Kailey Bray. She's here. She did so many projects, which we'll get into. I don't know how she does it, because I can't do that, and I'm unemployed. Anyways, that's what we're going to get into, so stick around. Boom. Nailed it. Kailey,
Hello.
welcome to the show.
Hi, guys.
Thanks first off for coming on. I know your life is kind of crazy right now, as we'll get into, and all the things you've got, but I appreciate you taking the time to sit down and chat and tell us about all your insane projects you have, which, for starters, let's just tell the audience, what is it that you do in the gaming world? What is your main passion, I guess?
So my main claim to fame in the gaming world, at least right now, is Diceandnice, the princess RPG. I'm the game master producer for that. I GM, mostly DM, mostly Dungeons and Dragons, quite a bit, and I play on streams, and I make streaming content.
Yeah, and it's a lot. And anyone who's seen Damsels and Dice, the link's in the description, so people can go check out that channel. It's quite a piece of work. It is quite an undertaking to do something like that. They're not long episodes. You should go watch that if you haven't already. I feel like most everyone in the gaming community has seen that by now, because it is quite a project. You basically took generic princesses and had them playing
fairy tale.
Right, generic fairy tale princesses, and had them playing Dungeons and Dragons, or at the time I remember it was generic tabletop role playing game.
Still kind of generic role.
Oh, it's still generic. Okay. How did that come to your mind?
I realized that my main friend group was like pretty equally split between professional RPG players and professional princesses. And I wanted to make that project before somebody else could.
And both those titles are not something you hear very often.
No, I attract weirdos, man.
Yeah.
Just weirdos. I don't know why.
It's probably the hard work, because that's just one of your many projects, right? You've also done, I know you were recently on a Witcher role-playing show you did, and Damsels and Dice, you were talking about starting your own live stream.
Yes, we go live on Sunday.
What has been your... I want to get into the Dungeon Master's mind of this one, because you created yourself a very unique challenge of creating a story for your friends, for your actresses who are playing princesses, who are playing different characters. What is your thought process and creative process coming up with an adventure for that level of pretend?
It's because my dungeon master character is also a character. I have to run a game as the character, as like the beauty character, not Kailey. So that's a whole extra level of writing in character, which isn't something you have to do super often as a GM.
No.
But this adventure, it's really pulling from beloved favorites, and there's going to be a lot of references and pop culture references that I think that people will hopefully appreciate. Live streaming, it's a little bit easier to toe the line of copyright infringement. No, I'm just it's a fan work.
Yeah.
Parody.
Fair use.
Me in so much trouble. But only if they can catch me.
Exactly. Then you sell everything, you leave the country, and
I disappear.
They'll still catch you because it's the mouse. Anyways, That sounds like a
Appreciating
very,
baseball books.
uh, it sounds like a really unique challenge, though, to
Hmm.
create so many things. And how many of the characters do you have in the live stream?
So we're gonna have between 4 and 6, depending on like
Okay.
scheduling and guest players and stuff like that. It's very new. We're trying a bunch of stuff out. I think we have 4 people on Sunday, and then it's just gonna grow. And I may look into having subscriber or follower goals to add another cast member or stuff like that. It's a strange time for everyone, so we're just kind of
Hmm.
figuring out a system that works for us.
And I think it's a good time to have something like this coming out because yeah, it's
Hmm.
so stressful. And I remember when the videos first started coming out, a lot of little girls were falling in love with the idea of it, and you were making it cool for the little girls to be like, I'm a nerd. I like Dungeons and Dragons. I like swords and things, and you made that a cool thing. And I think this is a perfect time to just reinforce that with your audience. So hopefully, I'm hoping it works out. I'm gonna try and tune in on Sunday as well. So to the viewers, make sure you watch it this Sunday on your Twitch channel, right?
Yes, it's Dice and Everything Nice on Twitch. We're going live at 6 o'clock Pacific time on Sunday.
Excellent. So that's a huge undertaking, and you normally do this at the top of the show. But what is your history with the game, and how long from when you started playing did it take you to start running your own sessions?
I started playing Dungeons and Dragons when I was like 13, 14. I had just started going to boarding school, and my friends uh, had been playing it for a while, so I kind of just jumped into one of their games. I was really, really lucky to have a diverse group as my first gaming group. My
Mm-hmm.
like first GM was like non-binary person, and so it was like I didn't have I. It's something that I hear about a lot. It's like, oh, like my first, I was the only girl in a group of men, and a lot of people who had their first introduction to D&D. I think I was really lucky that I had
Mm-hmm.
such like a rich experience, and it made me stick with the game forever. I think I started DMing in college. Um, I ran my first game actually for a class at Juilliard. They're like, teach us something you're an expert in. I'm like, great, we're playing Dungeons and Dragons. Here we go. And
Okay.
never looked back.
I think I need some more details on that. How did that come apart or come to pass? I should say. How did that happen?
At Juilliard,
Yeah.
it was I.
Was it
Juilliard is
just
a fake school. It was our point of view class where we had to teach the rest of the class something that we were experts in, and like take over the class ourselves, and we had like 3 hours. I was like, well, there are 17 people in this room, and we're all playing Dungeons and Dragons.
17 people for your first Dungeons and Dragons DMing is bold.
I think I was like 17,
Yeah,
16, 17.
that's insane. But that sounds like a great time and a great thing to share. What is it that you really love about the game that keeps you coming back?
I love the collaboration, just the storytelling, and as an actor, building stories together has always been my entire profession. It's my dream. It's what I want to do with my life.
Hmm.
And so getting to start a story and then seeing where other people take it, and watching how creative other people can be, and doing things you would never even think of, that I'm just like always chasing that feeling of surprise. I'm like, that's a brilliant idea. I'm stealing it from you. And that's totally transformed my story and made it something so much better than I thought it could have been.
Hmm. That's kind of been my motto on this whole show is that's a great idea. I'm stealing it. And I've learned quite a bit. It is such a great collaborative experience. Um, what has been? I want a personal story now. What is one moment that that stands out to you specifically as such a great storytelling moment for you
As
as a
a
player
DM,
or a DM, either one?
oh gosh, there's so many. Oh, I can't talk about that one because that was a play test. I'll talk about cats actually.
Okay, okay.
I learned more about dungeon mastering doing that cats game than I have in 10 years of DMing. But there was a moment where I was using something for flavor in the final boss battle, and I think that McCavity had like gotten swallowed by a swamp because I had like reskinned him to be a cat, except he was actually an adult black dragon. I think I don't even remember anymore. It was a long time ago, and that was a very difficult thing to do. And so I had him like sinking into the swamp, and one of my players decided to tap dance on his head. So perfectly, like it fit into the whole character arc of this guy and the whole like weird surrealism universe that was the Cats RPG, and it was just one of the most hilarious decisions I have ever seen someone make on camera. It was so good. But it was that was a whole experience.
That I feel like that whole project was a whole experience. Tell me more about this Cats RPG and how did that happen?
uh so Sage Ryan, who I collaborate with all the time, she's in Damsels. We've worked together on a couple of things. She was in The Witcher with me. um she mentioned that she wanted me to run a game for a couple more friends, people from the Valley Folk, Steve Zaragoza, and those other super, super funny people. And I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. She's like, we can't stop talking about, also, we need to go see Cats because we think it's hilarious and you have to come see Cats with us. And I was like, okay, great. So I'm just going to run a Cats D&D session for you guys. Everybody plays Tabaxi. And then suddenly it was a show, and I'm not really sure what happened, and I don't know when I agreed to it. I saw that movie 5 times, once by myself at home alone, which was the saddest time. Uh, uh, and it was honestly amazing. I got to work with Jessica, who you know from the
Mm-hmm.
Dungeon Run, and Sage, and then Steve Zaragoza and Anthony Carboni, who are brilliant improvisers and just generally hilarious people. And we had a whole day to shoot like 4 to 6 episodes. Weren't exactly sure. Just make a bunch of content and then edit it down into episodes. And just run wild. Sage and I wrote the adventure together, and it was the strangest thing I have ever made. It was so much fun.
It sounds like quite a thing. I watched part of it today, kind of getting ready, and
Sorry.
I was blown away by the amount of effort you guys put a lot of they put a lot of work in post, adding some effects and stuff, and you could tell on the people's faces how excited everyone was for this. I don't know if it's they were excited to play D&D, or if they were excited about cats, or if they were excited about kind of the absurd nature of the whole thing.
Gotta be the absurdity. You gotta buy into it, right?
It's seemed very enjoyable, and I was like, okay, I gotta check that out later, because that was literally an hour before we were going live. So I was like, I don't have time right now. Um, that is so strange. That was like, I remember when you mentioned that you were doing that a while back, and my mind was like, why? Why is that?
Why not?
Yeah, why not? And I guess that's one of the great things about D&D is the why not factor that we get in everything. Like we can come up with the strangest things and it's perfectly fine, which ties back into your creativity in, the joint storytelling methods of Dungeons and Dragons in general. Which it all comes around. It all comes around.
Yeah.
Jasper's Game Day is coming up.
Hmm.
I'm a little familiar with the story behind that, but what is that all about?
So Jasper's Game Day is run by Fenway, who is this amazing teen DM. She lost a couple friends to suicide, and and they were gaming friends, so she decided she wanted to do something about that, and she now runs a charity. Gosh, the exact name of the beneficiary. It's like the American Society Mental Health. I should know what this is. Oh, I'm terrible. But she essentially runs this. Normally, it's two events. They do a Jasper's game week, and then they do a Jasper's like streaming week. But we were actually supposed to go. I was supposed to run games locally in LA, April 18th, which couldn't happen. So we moved everything online, and so we have a whole week of incredible people all jumping in to support this charity and prevent suicide, especially teen suicide, and raising money for mental health awareness. And it is something that is so important to me. And the fact that Fenway's run it, like this is her brainchild. She's a brilliant dungeon master and producing this huge event. It's in collaboration with Mini Terrain Domain.
Wow.
It's going to be amazing. The first game they're launching Saturday.
This Saturday they're
going to launch. And it is Fenway's going to DM on D&D Beyond, and it's Jessica Parsons, it's Satine Phoenix, Patrick Rothfuss, and a couple of, I think there's like 3 more people. I'm just like the people I know off the top of my head. It's going to be an amazing game. I'm super excited to see it. And then my game is live on Tuesday. Jessica's in that one too. She's playing. So I'm playing Dungeons and Dragons with her on Saturday, Sunday, and Tuesday.
Wow. That's a lot.
Yep.
But she enjoys that, so.
She does.
That's a good thing. I just looked up the name of the I forgot the word.
The beneficiary, maybe?
Yes, that's the word.
Of the funds, yeah.
Yeah. It is called the American Association of Suicidology.
Thank you.
Is what that one is. So that is a very good thing to go and support then. So everyone should go watch that. It does this for donations, right? To raise money for that charity?
Yeah, so
is that the idea?
So they're gonna have like raffles, and a seat at my game was auctioned off. So I have an auction winner joining my game on the stream. So I'm pretty sure all the proceeds go directly to the charity, and you can. I don't know exactly the like logistics of the way that donations work, but I'm pretty sure you can donate, and there's going to be a goal and throughout the whole week. And I think some of the games are like interactive, like you can donate to affect the game, but don't quote me on that because I'm not 100% sure. It was last year. It was.
Okay, I won't quote you on that.
Don't know.
All right. So that's yet another project that you're involved in. Multiple projects. You're always working all the time. Now I want to switch gears a little bit. We talked about all your projects. I want to switch gears, and I want to really get into kind of your mind as a dungeon master and a game master. My first question, one of the questions I really enjoy asking is, what is your biggest challenge as a dungeon master?
I kind of have 2.
Okay.
I am intimidated by combat encounters, which I think is like a fairly common thing with a lot of dungeon masters. Is like, I'm afraid to run combat. I'm so afraid it's going to be boring. And then I remember as a player that combat is exciting. Doesn't matter how long it takes for my turn to come around. Like I engage in combat. I don't know why, you know, when I'm running games, it's boring. Just in my brain, not for my players, just for me.
Right.
I just have decided it's boring and I have to fix it. I feel like it's something that I've been trying to fix for a while, is remembering that to like let the story breathe a little bit. Like let the players start to chime in. It's so easy to like try and get to the next thing, or like something you're excited about, or encourage your players to like follow the plot line, and then remembering like, oh wait, like do you guys want to talk to each other? Like I'll be quiet, I'll just sit here. And then getting those opportunities to like sit and watch and just let them go. I love it. I'm so used to having to do scripted content lately that I forget sometimes that I don't have to do all the work and I can just let them do it.
Yeah, back to the collaborative storytelling. Those are really interesting challenges that you have. The combat one I find interesting because on your wall you have about 1,700 weapons hanging up. So I know your skill set. You're no stranger to combat. Has your skills in stage combat ever come into play while running games, and specifically in combat scenarios?
It really has, and maybe that's why I'm so intimidated by it, is because my bar is set so like specifically high, because I'm like, I know exactly how this works, and so I want other people to engage in it the way that they would a physical fight. So my descriptions and my use of monsters and their powers and their capabilities does tend to be a little bit martial, just using my background in stage combat and stunts, which is fun for me because then I play with players usually who I know from stage combat, and so they'll be like, okay, but what if this happens? And I have to be like, oh wait, yeah, no, for sure that would work. And getting to bring my two passions together, pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's always a fun thing to be able to do. Building on that, you have this background, a very specific background with stage combat. What are some tips you would give to people who don't necessarily have that background that they could use to make their combat more exciting?
Watch good fights. I'm always a big fan of like pulling from film, TV, novels, it's comics, that's video games. That's like what a lot of my games are based on. I'm inspired by the content that I consume. But you will learn everything you need to know about combat watching like the Princess Bride sword fight. It is so much like and just paying attention to like, oh, how does the story build there? What keeps people engaged in this? Or in like an epic monster fight, I just rewatched Fellowship of the Ring.
Nice.
With my roommates and just fighting the
Balrog, the troll, the cave troll.
Cave troll.
There we
Fighting
go.
the cave troll. I'm sorry, I'll leave.
You're a disgrace.
Nerd card revoked. Fighting the cave troll and just like what that takes and watching all the pieces come together, you learn how to build an encounter and how to make it a narrative tool from watching how other people have done it and being inspired by that.
That's a really interesting idea that I hadn't thought of before. And yeah, Princess Bride is everyone knows it's one of the greatest fight scenes ever. It's one of the greatest movies. But yeah, the storytelling just between the Inigo Montoya and Wesley character in their duel is such good storytelling as they go from kind of strangers to being practically best friends by the end, even though they're trying to kill each other. It's a really interesting way of looking at it. What are at least one other, or what's a lesser known movie or play or something that people may not have watched that has some really great fight scenes people can draw from?
Oh God, is Colin here yet? I need Colin.
He hasn't said anything, so if he is, he's keeping quiet.
I mean anything like the old school Robin Hoods. I am a huge fan of the Dead Man's Chest sword fight from Pirates of the Caribbean.
Is that the one with the wheel?
It's the one with the wheel.
The one with the wheel.
So ridiculous.
Yeah.
But I am definitely team like whimsy and ridiculousness and comedy for like grittier fights. Who does like really gritty fight scenes well? I mean, so many.
There's one, I feel like the movie is called The Duelist, I want to say, and I think it has Harvey Keitel. Are you familiar with this one?
That's a good one. And then
and it's supposed to be super realistic, but it's so boring to watch. I don't know. That's my opinion. I was like, because it's very quick and it's realistic. It's supposed to be realistic, but I don't know.
Real fighting is so fast.
Right.
It's not actually entertaining.
Yeah.
So I'm a sucker for swords, but like there are some really great fight scenes in Star Wars. There are amazing epic scenes in Lord of the Rings. Trying to think of like more sci-fi stuff because I am such like a one-hit wonder when it comes to
Science fiction's a little harder when you're thinking Dungeons and Dragons because we often don't put Dungeons and Dragons in the sci-fi context. So we always think of like swords, and then sci-fi comes around with guns and such. So that's a lot tougher.
Yeah,
in
but
my
it's
opinion.
still it is. It absolutely is. I know so many people who do it so well.
Mm-hmm.
Like Eric Campbell runs amazing sci-fi games, and or if you like look into things like vampire games too,
Mm-hmm.
that do combat so differently. It's a much more visceral RP experience, and that's so cool. And I've played in games like that, but I've never run games like that, so I don't know. I'm always such like a fantasy kid.
Mm. I had one guy in the chat mentioned John Wick.
Yes.
John
Ooh.
Wick.
I mean, yeah.
Which I gotta agree with that. If you could translate
Or
a John Wick fight to like bows and arrows, that'd be pretty rad. Or
yeah,
is
or
that?
the Daredevil fights.
Oh yeah, from the
The
TV
one,
show.
yeah. Oh, and also this isn't gritty, but the any of the Birds of Prey fights,
Have not
um,
watched that yet.
Richard, you should watch it.
I'm gonna have to now.
But the final like big group fight is one of my favorite like modern film fights lately, especially in like the superhero genre.
Mm-hmm.
It is so good, and I've definitely started implementing like the pattern of it and the pacing of it
Mm-hmm.
in combat encounters because it's so interesting to watch. You notice something new every single time.
Oh, okay. Have you found that doing that kind of thing or implementing these fight scenes has that? How have the players reacted when you implement stuff like that?
They're definitely more engaged. Only one or two people I think have cottoned on to what I was inspired by. But like, if you spend 10 minutes with me, I will obsess over one fight scene or another. So at
Mm-hmm.
some point they'll learn. But yeah, it's more engaging and exciting because I have a plan and you can kind of tell, and it's not just like, here's the monster, hit, hit, hit. Here's the other monster, hit, 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 hit. There's
Mm-hmm.
some kind of, there's like a bunch of moving pieces. So players have to be more engaged to kind of pay attention and figure out where they're going in that. And it matters so much more what happens right before their turn. They don't
Mm-hmm.
just spend the whole round thinking about what they're going to do. It's like a conversation.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I like that. See, here's where I go. I'm gonna steal that idea
Do it.
because I don't often do that in my game. So I'm gonna try to do that and amp up the ante a little bit. And you see how I took what you said was a challenge, and I just got advice from you on how to fix that in my own stuff. Because you said you had a challenge with combat. I doubt that, but if you
No,
say so.
it just stresses me out. I'm intimidated by it, so then I think about it more.
There you go. Intimidation. That's really good. I like that idea. And stealing ideas from everything. We all know great artists steal.
Yeah.
And that's all there is to it. I want to steal another idea out of your brain. I want to
Okay.
know, what is one piece of advice you have for new dungeon masters?
So that's always my advice, though. So you stole mine, because my advice is always just steal from your players.
Right, but now I ask you the question.
But no, but that's my advice.
Steal from your players.
Yeah, it's always about listening. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's finding ways to weave your players into your story and surprising them and making them invested. So stealing an idea that they have, like being willing to throw everything out as soon
Mm-hmm.
as someone says something like, no, you know what, that's better.
Mm-hmm.
And being willing to take that idea and run with it and trusting that you know more about the world than you have written down.
That's a big challenge, I think, right there. Just that one specific thing. Trusting that you know more about your world than you've written down. That's kind of scary for new DMs.
It's
right?
terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. But once you let that go once, and you let yourself do it the one time, every time it's easier. practicing that trust in yourself is the most important habit to build as a DM, because everything else is, it's rules, it's stuff you can look up, it's no big deal. Things can, pacing can slow, whatever, things happen. But trusting yourself and that you can get back on track, or that what you're doing is fun and entertaining and everyone is enjoying the game, that's a habit you have to build.
And that's the best way to build habits, is by doing it.
Yeah, just
Practice.
gotta keep doing it.
Yeah, and
I've make it.
Exactly exactly that. Fake it. If you don't know the name of some random goblin in the corner, and people are asking about him, you make up a name. You act like you had it all planned the whole time. They'll never know, unless you tell them. But other than that, they'll never know. I think
Vince Casso does a thing, and I have stolen it from him, where if we ask, because he runs a game with us, we ask, what's their name? And he just looks at us and he's like, they have a name, and it's a good name too.
That's a good way to do it. I always go to the I pause. I'm like, we're gonna take a bathroom break or something like that. That's generally my go-to method for that one. And then I just have to remember to come up with a name by the time I'm back, which doesn't always happen. That's some good advice. I like that idea of trusting yourself and getting in. There's so much you can break down with that.
Yeah.
In general,
it's so hard.
It is really hard to trust yourself. So what can a new player, a new DM do to remind them, like, to keep themselves or to make themselves more prepared to trust themselves, or make them less worried about it? Do you have any tips on that?
I know what helps me as far as trusting myself is paying attention to the stuff that I have anxieties about. Like, oh, I'm worried about the combat, I'm gonna obsess over it for a second. Or I feel unprepared in this way. Is there something that I can do to fix it? Or maybe there isn't. But taking the time during prep to be like, okay, what am I worried about? Like, what is keeping me from having fun? But I think the biggest thing to remember is that the DM is also a player. And you just have to be willing to play your game and play with your friends. And taking a little bit of that pressure off is like, I have to run this entertaining game for people. No. You have to play this entertaining game with people.
Yeah.
And approaching it from that way always helps take the pressure off of me a little bit. Be like, no. Like, we're all kind of doing this. Like, I have the numbers, but they have just as much of the story as I do.
Yeah. That's a really great way to think about it. And I think that would help a lot of people relax. That reminds me of a game system, and I forget what the system is. But one of the rules they have written in there, it says, for the DMs, part of the DM rules is play the game and find out what happens.
Oh, I love that.
And I want to say it was Fate, the Fate system, but I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, that idea of, like, remember, you're a player too. The story, it's going to change. It's going to kind of go off. This actually ties into a question we just got in the chat. So I'm going to read this question, and we will break it down a little bit. He's asking, as a person who is new to DMing, is it normal for me to have to improvise so much? The players I have are not bad by any means. They just do so much random stuff, and they're just worried I am getting wrapped up in their random stuff and forgetting about the main story I'm attempting to create. I do my best to link it back to the main story. I think that's a very common problem, or a very common thing. Improvising, since I started running games, it's been like 80% improv. I don't know what your ratio is.
Yeah.
It's a lot of improvising. But he's talking about players who kind of go off the rails, and he's trying to get them back. And I think there is a right way to do that. There is a way to get the players back on track with the main story without railroading, without making them feel like you're taking their choice away from them. What kind of tips do you have for people who could run into that problem?
I always look at, well, what about it is off the rails? Did they decide to hyper focus on some random NPC? Is there a location that was really interesting? Like, what about what off-track thing was so interesting to them? What about that was interesting?
Mm-hmm.
And then once you find out what it is that attracted your players, you can then make the rest of your storyline, that you can bring that into the rest of the story. So it's like, oh, they wanted like a cool forest adventure, so they like walked off into the woods when there's a town right there with all of the quests. Then you just kind of make it foresty. Like you just put a different flavor on it, and let them guide you into stuff that they are really interested in. And it's really easy to like reskin, because you're in charge of describing things. You thought they were going to fight goblins, but then they wanted to go, and they started, swimming into a pool, and they found a portal or whatever. Like, they can just make up all this crazy, crazy things. Like, oh, well, the goblins are now water goblet. Like, you just make stuff up.
Yeah.
They don't know.
And reskinning, I think, is one of that's the best tool I think DMs should learn, is how to just change something on the fly, reskin it, make it different. If you want them to fight a red dragon and it's fire, but they're, in a cold place, you have ice dragons. But, the idea is you just shift what you're doing.
And you just describe it differently and keep all the same numbers. It doesn't have to be stressful. Just be like, okay, great. This just looks different now. The bones are the same, and it just fits the story. I'm just yes-anding, and the players have taken this in an unexpected direction, but they're also telling me what they're finding fun about the story I'm telling. So that's a lot of information.
Yeah.
So you wanna really pay attention to that. That's gold.
Mm-hmm. And I think if you pivot into letting them do what they're looking at, that can increase the fun for them. And if that's something you, as the DM, if that's something you enjoy, then that increases your fun too. If it's like, if the story is stressful for you in any way, and you're not having fun, then that's where you gotta rework things. But I think that's very good advice. And Chris says, awesome feedback, thank you. So answered his question.
Yay.
Nailed it. That kind of got me thinking about some preparation.
Mm-hmm.
And this is it's a question, it's a debate. People, always wonder, how much prep should I run my games? And I think it's a very personal thing. But I'm curious, how much preparation do you put into an average campaign session? Not a one-shot, but a session of a campaign.
I haven't run a lot of long-term campaigns lately.
Okay, then let's pivot that into one-shots.
Well, like I do both, and I'm just like, and I kind of honestly, it's the same for the most part. When I'm writing and homebrewing the content, obviously it takes a little bit longer. But for like a pre-written module, I don't really actually need that much time. When I started DMing, it was like, hey, will you run a game for us in now? And I had to learn how to just run a game. Actually, I just wrote an article for Girls Game Shelf about that, actually. Just like, people wanting to run a game, great, go. You can. Nothing's stopping you. What do they know?
Yeah.
Prep time, I try and give myself time to like read through what I think I'm going to cover, make sure I have like music pulled up and stats for any encounters pulled up. The Kobold Fight Club encounter builder that you recommended to me however long ago that was, a lifesaver.
That one is great. That one is brilliant.
It cuts down my prep time like to nothing. That lets me run a game on the fly and be like, yeah, you want to fight? Sure, I'm just gonna
Yeah, put some characters in this and hit go, and then you're running it. So what are the things you focus on in your prep time? You mentioned encounters, but what story-wise, what is it that you put the most focus on in your limited prep?
So for my prep, and I lean pretty heavily on the pillars of D&D, the exploration, role-playing, and combat, and making sure, like, knowing that I have at least, like, one big thing under each umbrella. And then I tend to have some kind of puzzle or riddle ready to go, because I like those. So those are the things that I incorporate into my prep.
Okay.
Before questions.
Now I want some advice from you because I'm terrible with puzzles and riddles.
I'm still learning.
Like, but what are your favorite kind of riddles to throw at players?
I like word games. I like word games or picture games. I've got the damsels. It's obvious. I hope it's not going to be too tough. It's going to be princess worthy. So we'll see how that goes. You and I have talked about this. The Redwall books and their
Oh,
riddle.
yes.
I'm really inspired by Brian Jakes' like treasure map with words style of puzzle. So read Redwall again, and
That's a good idea.
those.
I haven't
'Cause
read Redwall in years, so
it's really those are really inspiring for me.
that's
And the
cool.
DM's Guild also has so many like just collections of puzzles and
That's
stuff, and
true.
I've kind of been looking through them and
Hmm.
getting inspired by those. Those have been really helpful to just kind of be like, oh, in case I need something extra, I have something to just plug in. But I'm one of those nerds that just like browses DM's Guild for fun to see if there's anything.
There's a lot of really good stuff on DM's Guild.
Oh yeah.
It's amazing the creativity of the community that they've just been like, and they're putting it out there. It's not necessarily, Wizards of the Coast isn't coming out and saying, "Hey, write this for us." It's people who are just like, "Oh, I want to come up with something and share it," and
And it's great.
it's growing rapidly. And I'm also going to mention they're going to do a event coming up called the Play It Forward event, where
Oh,
it's.
that.
Have you heard of this one?
No.
Oh, it's
Someone mentioned it to me and I was like, oh, I have to look that up.
it's 100% of the income from the modules that they sell of the creators is going straight to the writers. So
That's
rather
awesome.
than them taking half, it's going to the authors. So it's pretty cool. And there's going to be quite a few first-time writers and stuff getting in on some bundles that are going to be put out there in the next
You gonna
couple
put
days.
it?
I have mine that I published. I'm going to submit it to the RPG Writer Workshop people.
Nice.
We'll see if they accept it because I didn't write it during the workshop, but
Mhm.
they didn't say it had to be. So we'll see if they let me in that bundle. Other than that, it's still on there, so it's out there for the world to find. Back to puzzles. Interesting thing that I thought of while you were explaining it is the concept of puzzles in Dungeons and Dragons shouldn't be very difficult, right? They have to be like just enough to challenge, but not so difficult that the players are stumped and they can't figure it out.
Right.
What do you trying to think of a good way to word this? What do you do to make sure that you don't make your challenges too difficult?
Sometimes I run it by people who aren't going to be playing and see how quickly they like. I'll just like shoot it to a roommate or like my mom and be like, "How difficult is this?
Okay.
What's the answer?" And they're used to that at this point. So peer review is helpful.
Mm-hmm.
In game too, if it looks like they're starting to get stumped, I try and give myself a backdoor when I'm writing the puzzle of like a perception check or an intelligence check will reveal a scuff mark or a track they didn't see
Mm-hmm.
before, or a cleric will pray and it's an act of God. Like, who knows? It depends on the situation.
Right.
But I do try and write like a hint into a puzzle just in case, just to
That's a
have it
really good
ready.
idea. That's a really good idea. I don't know how many times I've presented a puzzle and the players get stumped, and I'm like, oh crap, I need to come up with something real quick to help them get out of this. Otherwise, you sit there for 2 hours trying to solve a
And they're
puzzle.
frustrated and you don't know
Yeah,
what to do,
and
and yeah.
it can be really tough. So that's really good advice too. Just add in, a little extra, a little hint, something in there.
Yeah, just in case they need it. And if they don't need it, great. If they do need
Yeah,
it, it's there.
everything. Another advice that I read from Michael Shea.
Hmm.
He goes online as Sly Flourish is his
Yeah.
handle. He wrote a book called The Lazy Dungeon Master and the Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master. And in one of those, he mentioned all that intro, and I kind of forgot what I was saying. Oh, if they don't need it. Oh, he presented the idea that you can come up with things And unless it's set at the table, it's not set in stone.
Right.
Right? So you come up with ideas of scenes that might happen, and they don't necessarily, if they don't happen, they're not set in stone. That's not in your game. You can forget about them. The same goes with the puzzles. If they don't need the hint, was the hint even there? You don't know. The players will never know. And that is a good point from Chris in the chat. He mentions if you leave hints on the journey, that can help in the puzzle as well. So it doesn't have to be right in that moment. It can be leading into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that. Things to think about. There's so much to learn about this game. It's absurd.
And everybody plays it differently, and every group is going to
Yeah.
be excited about something really, really unique. So
Yeah.
it's always
Exactly. So now, Kailey, closing out, wrapping things up, where can everyone find you online? Give me like the full rundown.
Oh gosh.
It's going to take like another hour, I know.
So I tweet about everything that I do at Hoppa Barbarian. Damsels you can find everywhere at Diceandnice. We are going live on Twitch this Sunday. Dice and Everything Nice on Twitch. Jasper's Game Day. We are going live with Mini Terrain Domain.
That's going to be in the link. It'll be in the description.
That's on Tuesday, whenever the 5th is. I think that's Tuesday.
Yes.
Might be Monday. Who knows?
It's Tuesday. It's
What
Tuesday.
The Cats RPG happened and is amazing, and I'm so grateful to have gotten to work with those hilarious people. It's on the Valley Folks YouTube. Damsels Nice and Everything Nice. We have our YouTube channel. I don't know. My articles are live on Girls Game Shelf. I write advice about playing and or running games of Dungeons and Dragons. The Call of Cthulhu game is up on the Venture Maidens YouTube channel, and the Witcher game is up on the Hyper RPG YouTube channel.
So much stuff. And now, here you are in quarantine.
Here I am, busier than ever. Thank goodness.
Yes.
Lucky.
Kailey, thank you again for coming on the show and answering all these questions and kind of talking about Dungeons and Dragons with me. I do appreciate it. It's always good to, especially since we haven't been able to play D&D since the quarantine happened, and that was a nice surprise. But it was. I appreciate you coming on and taking the time today.
Yeah, it's good to see you.
And to the viewers, if you stick around tomorrow, we have another great guest, Cameron Ackerson from the D&D Coalition. And then later in the week, we have others. We have Chris Solo from Fabled 42.
Awesome DM.
Who I know you've played with him before. Vivian Quach from Unscripted Tales. She's a much smaller Instagram account. And Chase Webb from Rollin' at 20. So we got some big DM advice coming down this week. That'll take us through to Saturday. So stick around. And thanks for watching.
Thanks, guys. Everybody.